All right, and we're back on the Shit Show of Politics French edition. This episode is focusing on the far right, the French Front National, and racism in French culture, which are bit of downer subjects, but that we have to discuss to understand the current state of French politics.
Thank you, Amor. I wanted to go back to the last ideas or the main idea that we had in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
That was how racism has morphed, from biological racism, from this is actually a biological divide and this is a biological difference, to the cultural. No, it's their culture. They don't integrate. It's not, the only cultures that are more similar to us can integrate properly in our overall society, as a positive contributors. And this is something that I've seen also in Denmark very clearly. I've seen progressive people or people that it's easy to assume that they are standing on the left and arguing for that, for example, for the near relocation of refugees and how they should instead. So especially this came in during the main Syrian crisis, just with this leftists telling, well, their culture is very different to ours here in Denmark. So better they are in places where they are more alike, right? And where they are their culture is they have less of a culture shock.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we well aware, Denmark has one of the most restrictive immigration policies in Europe, and again, not wanting to delve too much into it because we're not part of it. But obviously, the issues with Danish racism are also extremely prevalent. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
But it was just to bring home a point on how this cultural integration has become a pervasive part of the discourse throughout Europe. Not just it wasn't specifically to delve into calling out the Danish specifics, but how it has permeated throughout.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was actually the point that I was trying to make, in that the racist discourse has always been here, but it has evolved with time to adjust to what is considered scientific valid discourse or acceptable discourse as well. So, and I feel like what was considered a scientific truth with phrenology, pseudoscience, has now been debunked enough that the discourse has shifted to have a bigger focus on the cultural, the cultural aspect, the culture wars, and also moral panics over what is considered acceptable or not acceptable in the public space.
Phrenology has been debunked, except in the incel space. But let's
like I said, it hasn't completely disappeared, but it's not as prevalent and established as valid scientific discourse as it was in the 19th century when it first came out.
Pseudoscience acknowledged as such.
Yes.
Today, but I wanted to also talk a bit about the international extreme populist right, and something that I found very bringing was an interview that I watched by Steve Bannon. That's been one of the prophets of this movement, or at least it's one of the figures that I identify of a very influential and very successful in his influence across different countries. And what was extremely surprising for me was that a big part of the analysis he did was felt super on point. The analysis he did on the symptoms and of society and some of the root causes, I felt like, yeah, yeah, yeah. For example, he called out the absolute terrors of financial deregulation, the obscene opulence of billionaires, the ingrained unfairness of the meritocratic game and how it disenfranchises a lot of populations, the power, the backstage of power and the back channels of power that makes that undermines democracy and make it that many of the core decisions or many of the framings of the decisions that finally are taken by parliament are articulated, or at least are articulated in back channels or through back channel influence, through lobbying and through these mediums. And finally, he was talking about the corporate interests that rig the game. So I don't know, Amor, but for me it sounds absolutely on point.
Yeah, I would say at least getting back to what I know better. So the way the far right discourse in France, they actually tap into sometimes real issues like disenfranchisement, for a lot of population, the disappearance of easily accessible public services, difficult access to education, but instead of having a systemic analysis of the issues and how maybe capitalism could factor into it, they come with a simple answer of the problem is immigration. Immigration costs too much. Immigration takes away jobs and opportunities, and so part of the far right discourse efficiency, because I mean, for example, the far right in France is very inefficient in some aspect, but as a cultural winner, they have been efficient with that in tapping into some real anxieties,
Real pains.
real pains, and then giving it a simple answer that is more palatable than accepting that the capitalist system maybe is not that efficient because it feels too huge to combat. Whereas racist rhetoric that is going to confirm you in the idea that you are superior in your white Christian culture and that you can do something against the issues, because if it's just solving immigration, that seems like a doable task more than changing capitalism, and then you have a winning recipe.
And
in a way.
that was what was baffling. Exactly, you spotted on from the documentary, right? That for 40 minutes I listened to Steve Bannon in this documentary called America's Great Divide. It's a PBS documentary available in YouTube. Um, so the analysis was rather good, and he was mentioning the absolute outcry of the rescue of the banking system after the financial crisis of the 2000s, and how that was accompanied by people being kicked out on the streets and being absolutely disenfranchised, and a lot of the most vulnerable people in society feeling that they were abandoned and made fun of, and or there was they added assault to injury, right? Or and and what was baffling was that he did the analysis that felt mostly very on point, and then when he came to the part of the answers and the solutions, was what you were saying, right? So was and the solution is that we should double down on being more chauvinist, and the solution is that we should double down. More jingoistic will be the English term, and the solution will be that we double down on the aggressive against immigration, and the solution is that we X and Y, right?
Yeah, but one thing I would like to nuance, because yes, we can underline that some of these economic struggles are very real, but not every disenfranchised poor people turns to the far right. So there's also at least confirmation bias here in that population who turn to the far right. I mean, not wanting to analyze what is in people's head, because obviously having a simple answer, immigration is the problem, to complex issues is a draw, but the main draw is also white supremacy. It is a discourse that say, yes, you are special because you're white, your culture is special because you're white, and you've been deprived of what you're owed, like a sense of white entitlement and shall we say it, white privilege, and if it works, it also because it taps into this white supremacy ideology. So obviously, in a way, yeah, you can understand and underline that there are economic issues, disenfranchisement issues, but again, at the end of the line, if you accept such a simple answer as the problem is immigration, the problem is the greater emplacement to complex issue, it's also because you want also to have this white nationalist discourse that can be a way of feeling superior in your identity.
And just to make a little point on white supremacy, I think for me it's useful also to understand that white supremacy behaves pretty much like patriarchy, right? That it doesn't mean that all the net effects for men are positive, or all the men, the white people's, the people racialized as whites effects on white supremacy are positive. There is a huge part of both males and men and white people that live in this disenfranchisement and for whom the net positive effect of these systems of power structures and cultural and philosophical and cultural edifices are basically a deterrent and a negative, have a very negative effects on society.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the French far right, I think that might be one of the specific of France compared to, for example, the American alt-right, is that the base voting group of Front National and Marine Le Pen has always been in the popular classes. Marine Le Pen has tried again and again to consolidate her vote in the more middle class, bourgeois class of the population, and in the pensionist segment of the population, which are very huge voter groups. And so far, she hasn't succeeded in making significant gains in this population, and that's one of the reasons. Well, there is still a glass ceiling for the Front National, because for the French, it's really about tapping into the struggling working class population. So not the most disenfranchised, not always the unemployed, but for example the self-employed, the small businesses, the employees who struggle with 2 or 3 jobs. That's the core of the electorate here.
Yeah, and there's something in this. In the cultural milieu, I think, in the cultural environment of nowadays, that I believe they also feed a lot on, and is that we cannot be proud of our cultural heritage anymore, right? Since we are coming to a place in which colonialism and its horrors are becoming more and more present in anyone that wants to listen, right? And anyone that wants to inform themselves on what impact has it have throughout. Yes, we saw it very minimally in history class in high school. We brushed through how they divided Africa with a ruler, and they said, okay, this is for you, this is for you, this is for you, the different European powers. But we're coming to a point in which all the horrors of Leopold's Belgian Congo and whatnot are being it's impossible to not acknowledge. Well, it is possible not to not acknowledge it, but when we are in this historical moment in which we might feel that we need to hold ourselves accountable for some of the horrors that have bring us to where we are, there is a very gut feeling reaction from a significant part of the population of, so you're telling me that I cannot sing the songs of my childhood, so that everything from my childhood and from the culture that was brought up to, and that is ingrained in the marrow of my bones, or that has been fed into the marrow of my bones, is wrong? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's what is called psychological reactance, meaning that if you start saying that, yeah, you this and this term is a slur, or you shouldn't glorify your colonial empire, the gut reaction is going to be, oh, are you telling me what to do, or you forbidding me to do something? And we are wired to reject this kind of constraints, and you have this in French a lot, because against the management of the colonial past is very complicated, and obviously the right, absolutely, the far right in France, and even segments of the right, glorifies the cultural colonial past, glorifies especially the Napoleonic period. That's extremely funny, because the French far right is head over heels over Napoleon, because that's when France was huge and influential and was conquering most of Europe. And for the rest of Europe, it's like, no, Napoleon was a fucking dictator and invaded our countries.
Not for the whole Europe. I think there's also a lot of the brand of France as an empire, as an imperial power, that is about the Enlightenment, and it's about the Republican values, and it's about, so at least the fraternité, égalité, liberté, these are pretty much the brand that if you don't know anything else about la francophonie and the French culture, that's what you might,
absolutely. But actually what happened usually, summarizing it in very broad terms, is that a lot of the European populations were very happy to see the French come, because they would usually topple absolute monarchs and bring forth these ideas, liberté, égalité, fraternité. And then they understood that Napoleon just wanted to conquer the territories. So much for freedom. And then there were some very strong reaction against the French, as they should, because it was an imperialistic enterprise, and it was fought against for very legitimate reasons. But another aspect that I think is important, apart from, oh no, we cannot sing these songs, we cannot use these terms, the whole political correctness discourse, anti-woke discourse, it's also about what is considered as normal and what is accepted in the public space. And I feel like sometimes part of the rejection is also that one model was, and it ties back to what we discussed about the model of French universalism, that the model was to be Christian, to be married, to clear men-women binary, conforming to the country's culture, and now with the notion of no, we need actually to be able to incorporate diverse culture, to live and let live people with what they want to do. It also creates this sense of rejection of, I mean, it's my personal interpretation, but the way I see it, it's like, and it ties also to the notion of white supremacy. You used to be the norm. You used to be able to see yourself as good, moral, or even superior because of what you have. And suddenly you have this whole discourse saying that, no, you're not the norm. You're just one amongst many, and you should not consider your model superior to others. And for some people, it's fine. Like, yeah, live and let live. Everyone should be entitled to figure out their own identities. And for others, it's a cultural crisis, because it means that the value that they ascribe to their own identities is being under attack. And in France, for example, we saw it a lot when we had the vote for gay marriage. Which created a huge reaction of the Catholic far right and conservative group. It actually reinvigorated them in a way, because there was and part of the discourse that's very revealing, saying that, oh, but give the gays the exact same rights, but just don't call it marriage. Call it civil union, call it whatever, but marriage should just the term. They were clinging on to the term, saying that no, marriage should just be men and women. It's ours.
It's this holy union between a man and a woman under the spirit of the Holy Ghost that can be called marriage.
Yeah, no, but the notion that's because it didn't take anything away from them, but just the fact that what was considered the norm in marriage could be given to others, and so threaten the sense of superiority and what was more right, created such strong reactions, and that's also part of what fuels this so-called culture wars.
Great. So I think we're coming to the end of our third episode. Is there going to be a fourth episode to wrap up?
Yes, because we're going to do at least a fourth episode on the parliament elections. So the first round for French people will be next Sunday. So I think we'll try to comment
from the day of recording. So that
yes.
means...
So we'll try to comment about this and maybe talk a bit more about how the French political landscape might evolve after this parliamentary election, in which a lot hangs in the balance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.